For centuries, the world had revered one military machine, the Macedonian Phalanx, an impenetrable and invincible wall of spears created by Alexander the Great's father and perfected by Alexander himself. It seemed that this living fortress of steel and courage would forever dominate the battlefield. But on one foggy day, on the nameless hills in the heart of Greece, this legend encountered a new order, an army that moved not like a wall, but like a stream, penetrating every crack and crushing from within. It was a battle not just between two armies, but between two philosophies of war, the outcome of which changed history forever. Watch the video to the end to find out how one nameless officer made a decision that changed the course of the battle, and why the indestructible Phalanx proved powerless against the flexibility of the Roman legion. What if I told you that everything the greatest commanders had believed for centuries turned out to be untrue? The Phalanx was not just a military formation, it was a symbol of order, power, and unbreakable discipline. Imagine a living organism made up of thousands of warriors, protected by a single shield and attacking with 5-meter sarissa spears. This system was perfected and conquered half the world under the leadership of Alexander. On flat terrain, the Phalanx resembled a steamroller that crushed any infantry and cavalry in its path. For the ancient world, it was the ultimate weapon, the pinnacle of military thought. On the other hand, there were the Romans, whose army was organized completely differently. Their legion was not a monolithic wall, but consisted of dozens of small, independent units called maniples. Each maniple could act independently, retreat, attack, and change direction without disrupting the overall formation. It was a philosophy of flexibility and adaptability. If the Phalanx was a heavy hammer, the legion was a series of precise and rapid strikes with a scalpel. It did not try to crush the enemy with a frontal attack, but sought out its weak points, flanking it and penetrating its rear. On paper, it seemed that the Phalanx had all the advantages: long-range attack thanks to the sarissa and an impenetrable front. A Roman legionnaire with his short gladius sword had to be stopped long before he could strike. But the theory of war often differs from practice. It was precisely this clash of two opposing approaches that was to take place on the hills of Cynoscephalae: monolithic power versus distributed flexibility, order versus chaos, which was itself the highest form of order. The Romans did not invent anything radically new in metallurgy or small group tactics. They merely perfected the idea that an army should not be a fragile structure, but a living, breathing system. A system capable of adapting to any terrain and any opponent. This battle was to give the final answer to the question of what was more important: the indestructible power of a single blow, or the ability to deliver 1,000 small but precise strikes. The answer that determined the fate of the Mediterranean for the next 500 years, and that answer was unexpected for many. The world held its breath as it watched the two titans prepare for battle. Each was confident of its superiority, based on glorious victories of the past. But the future belonged to only one of them. I'm very interested to hear your point of view. Which military philosophy do you think is more effective in theory, Macedonian power or Roman flexibility? Write about it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Are you ready to learn the profound truth about why these two great powers, Rome and Macedonia, inevitably clashed in a deadly battle for hegemony? The conflict between the rising Roman Republic and Hellenistic Macedonia was not an accident or a misunderstanding. It had been brewing for decades of tension and contradictions. After its triumphant victory over Carthage in the Second Punic War in 201 BC, Rome finally became the undisputed dominant military power in the entire Western Mediterranean and eagerly turned its expansionist gaze to the rich east across the Adriatic. The West had been conquered and was under control, leaving the East, the last frontier of conquest, where Greek gold and culture beckoned to the Romans, weary of wars with barbarians and thirsting for easy prey in civilized kingdoms, weakened by centuries of internecine strife after the death of Alexander the Great, who left the empire without an heir or unity. In the eastern Mediterranean, the Hellenistic kingdoms, the Diadochi, the direct heirs of Alexander the Great's divided empire after 323 BC, ruled supreme. The strongest and most organized of them was traditionally ancient Macedonia, under the rule of the energetic King Philip V of the Antigonid dynasty. He was an ambitious and energetic middle-aged ruler who passionately dreamed of restoring the former lost greatness and territories of his empire from the time of Alexander. Philip looked westward with concern, seeing the growth of Roman power, and southward with greed, seeing the weakness of the Greek city-states, deciding that the best defense was offense, and that expansion to the south would strengthen him against the threat from the west, not realizing that it was precisely this expansion that would provoke Roman intervention as a pretext for intervention. Philip therefore cynically saw the Greek city-states, weakened by endless civil strife, as easy prey for absorption. He actively formed advantageous alliances with some against others, waged successful local wars, and gradually and methodically expanded his political influence in mainland Greece and on the strategic Aegean coast. This inevitably disturbed other independent Greek states, Rhodes, Pergamum, Athens, and ultimately caused alarm in distant Rome, which was monitoring the balance of power. The Greeks appealed to Rome for help against Macedonian aggression, providing the Romans with a moral and legal pretext for intervention under the noble slogan of protecting the weak from the strong. Although the real goal was control over the region and its resources, the gold mines of Macedonia and the trade routes of the east. The Roman Republic hypocritically presented itself publicly under the noble propaganda slogan of defending the freedom of the Greeks from Macedonian tyranny. In reality, the pragmatic Roman Senate did not want to strategically allow any state in the east to become too strong and dominant, upsetting the balance of power. The emergence of a new regional hegemon in the form of a strengthened Macedonia would directly threaten Rome's long-term commercial and political interests in the region. Rome did not want to liberate the Greeks, but to control them as clients, preventing the emergence of a competitor capable of uniting the East against Roman expansion. Classic divide and rule geopolitics, where the freedom of the Greeks was only a convenient pretext for intervention, not the true goal, which the Greeks understood too late when the Roman legions remained in Greece forever after their victory. The First Macedonian War of 214–205 BC ended without result. The status quo remained unchanged, but left behind deep mutual distrust, suspicion, and unresolved issues between the parties. When Philip V rashly entered into a secret alliance with the vast empire of Antiochus III of Seleucid to cynically divide the weakening possessions of Ptolemaic Egypt, the patience of the Roman Senate finally ran out. It was a red flag. The Romans issued a harsh ultimatum to Philip, categorically demanding that he immediately cease all military aggression against the Greek states under threat of war. The alliance between the two great powers, Macedonia and the Seleucids, could create a bloc capable of opposing Rome, so it had to be destroyed preemptively by defeating Philip before Antiochus could come to his aid from the east, a strategy of crushing the enemy piece by piece, preventing them from uniting. Philip V, confident in the invincible power of his professional army and phalanx, arrogantly ignored Rome's humiliating demands, considering them a bluff. Thus, the Second Macedonian War of 200–197 BC inevitably began, a war of destinies. This was not just another local war over disputed territories or cities, but a fundamental clash between two worlds and civilizations. The young, dynamic, and aggressive Roman Republic against the old, proud of its past Macedonian monarchy. Rome represented the future, flexibility, innovation, mobilization of the masses, while Macedonia represented the past, traditions, and the professionalism of the elite. Their clash was to show which was stronger, Roman adaptability or Macedonian discipline, legion or phalanx, republic or monarchy, west or east. The first 2 years of the war, 200–198 BC, were marked by mixed success without decisive results. The Romans, under the command of mediocre consuls, were unable to inflict a decisive, crushing defeat on the experienced Macedonians in open battle. The Phalanx held. Everything changed dramatically when command of the Roman army in Greece was strategically transferred to a new, unconventional man from the younger generation. The Senate realized that it needed not just a military leader, but a diplomat and Hellenophile capable of winning the Greeks over to Rome's side with propaganda and promises, turning the war with Macedonia into a liberation mission rather than a conquest. This required a special person who understood the Greek mentality and spoke their language not only literally but also culturally. This fateful person was Titus Quinctius Flamininus, a young, only 30-year-old and extremely ambitious consul of 198 BC. He was not only a recognized talented commander with experience in the Punic Wars, but also a rare diplomat for a Roman, who knew and sincerely loved Greek culture, language, and history, a Philhellene. It was he, armed not only with a sword, but also with words, who was to take up the military and ideological challenge to Philip V, a veteran of dozens of wars and intrigues and a most experienced king. Flamininus was the Senate's ideal instrument for the Greek campaign. He could win on the battlefield and in the minds of the Greeks at the same time, which made him more dangerous than any ordinary commander, because he deprived Philip not only of victories, but also of legitimacy, luring the king's allies with promises of freedom under Roman protection. The clash between the two armies and two leaders became historically inevitable with each passing day. Two powerful armies, the Roman legions and the Macedonian phalanx, led by two strong, charismatic leaders with opposite personalities, were actively seeking a decisive battle to end the war. The fate of all of Greece and the entire Hellenistic world was to be decided once and for all in a single bloody battle. The victor would gain hegemony in the east, while the loser would lose everything. Both sides understood the stakes. This was not just a battle for land, but a battle for the future of civilization, where the victor would write history and set the rules for centuries to come. Therefore, both sides gathered all their available forces at the site of the clash, preparing to stake everything on a single roll of the dice. But how exactly did these two mighty, renowned armies happen to meet on the hills of Thessaly, whose Greek name, Cynoscephalae, literally translates as dog heads because of their shape? In the next dramatic chapter, you will learn in detail about two great commanders, Flamininus and Philip, whose contrasting personalities, ambitions, and strategies determined the course of ancient history on the battlefield. The secret that changed the war often lies not in weapons, but in people. The Battle of Cynoscephalae was not just a clash between a legion and a phalanx. It was a duel between two colorful personalities. On one side stood Philip V, King of Macedonia. Philip was an experienced ruler and commander who had been on the throne for several decades. He was hardened by dozens of battles and diplomatic intrigues. He personally led his phalanx into battle and knew war firsthand. However, years of struggle and constant tension had made him suspicious and sometimes impulsive. He was accustomed to victories over his Greek neighbors and perhaps underestimated his new enemy from across the sea. He believed in the invincibility of the Macedonian military machine created by his great ancestors. His opponent was Titus Quinctius Flamininus, a representative of a new generation of Roman aristocrats. He was young, just over 30 years old. But behind this youth lay a sharp mind, enormous ambition, and a deep understanding not only of war but also of politics. Flamininus was a Hellenophile. He spoke Greek fluently and admired Greek culture and history. This made him not just a conqueror, but a liberator in the eyes of many Greeks. He skillfully used propaganda, promising the Greek city-states freedom from Macedonian rule. In military affairs, he was a typical representative of the Roman school. He valued discipline, flexibility, and initiative in his subordinates. He was not afraid to deviate from standard tactics and trusted his officers to make decisions on the battlefield. Thus, it was not just two commanders who clashed on the battlefield, but two different styles of leadership. Philip represented a centralized monarchical power, where all decisions were made by one person. Flamininus, on the other hand, was a product of the republican system, where individual initiative within the framework of a common strategy was valued. Their characters were reflected in their armies. Philip's phalanx was powerful but slow-moving, completely dependent on the king's orders. Flamininus's legion was more flexible and able to adapt to changing circumstances, much like the Roman Republic itself. This battle was to be a personal test for both of them. For Philip, it was a chance to confirm his right to be called Alexander's heir and to stop Roman expansion. For Flamininus, it was an opportunity to make a name for himself by defeating the legendary Macedonian army and winning glory for Rome as the liberator of Greece. Their personal confrontation added a special drama to the upcoming battle. Each of them led his army, confident in the correctness of his path and his military philosophy. But history judged them in its own way. Guess what happened next when these two systems came face to face? To understand the outcome of the battle, we need to look inside these two military machines. Philip V's Macedonian army was built on the classic Hellenistic model, with the phalanx at its center. The phalangites were armed with long, more than 5-meter-long sarissa spears. They were arranged in 16 rows deep, with the first 5 rows holding their spears parallel to the ground, creating an impenetrable forest of sharp points in front of the front line. The remaining rows held their sarissas at an angle, protecting the formation from above. The strength of the phalanx lay in its unity and monolithicity. On flat terrain, its frontal attack was virtually unstoppable. However, this power had a downside. The phalanx was extremely vulnerable from the flanks and rear, and very slow to maneuver. The Roman army was organized in a fundamentally different way. Its basis was the legion, consisting of approximately 4,200 infantrymen. The legion was divided into 30 maniples, which were its main tactical element. The maniples were arranged in 3 lines. The youngest soldiers, the hastati, stood in the first line. The more experienced principes stood in the second line, and the veterans, the triarii, stood in the third, reserve line. This formation resembled a chessboard. The gaps between the maniples in the first line were covered by the maniples in the second line. This allowed the legion to easily rearrange itself, let skirmishers pass through, or withdraw tired units and replace them with fresh ones. Each manipulus was an independent tactical unit. It could attack, defend, or maneuver independently of its neighbors. This flexibility was the legion's main advantage, especially in rough terrain. The legionary's weaponry was also different. Instead of a long sarissa, he had 2 throwing spears, pilums, and a short thrusting and slashing sword, the gladius. In close combat, if the enemy managed to break through the line of spears, the legionary was much more effective in individual combat than the phalanx soldier. Thus, we see 2 completely different approaches. The Macedonian army was a rigid, centralized system designed for a single crushing blow. The Roman army was a flexible, decentralized system capable of adapting to any conditions. The Battle of Cynoscephalae was to be a testing ground for these 2 systems. The terrain on which they were to meet played a decisive role in this test. In the next chapter, you will learn how chance and the terrain set the stage for the decisive drama. The 2 armies, Macedonian and Roman, maneuvered across the fields of Thessaly for several days. Both sides sought an advantageous position for the decisive battle. Philip sought a wide, flat plain, ideal for his phalanx. Flamininus, on the other hand, preferred hilly, rugged terrain. Such terrain would negate the phalanx's main advantage and allow his legions to use their flexibility. The commanders played a deadly game of cat and mouse. The weather was bad, with heavy rains and thick fog in the mornings. This made reconnaissance and troop movements difficult. The armies often lost sight of each other, moving literally by touch. Eventually, the armies set up camp on opposite sides of a ridge called Cynoscephalae, the name translated as dog heads because of the bizarre shape of the peaks. Neither commander planned to fight at this location. The terrain here was completely unsuitable for a classic battle. It consisted of a series of steep, rocky hills and ravines. It was practically impossible to deploy a long, straight line of phalanx on such slopes. However, fate decreed otherwise. On a foggy morning, both commanders sent reconnaissance units to the ridge of hills separating their camps. They did not know that the enemy had done the same. At the top of the ridge, in thick fog, the Roman and Macedonian reconnaissance units unexpectedly clashed. A fierce battle ensued. It was an accidental skirmish that was not supposed to escalate into anything more. Both sides began to send reinforcements to their advance units. The small skirmish quickly grew. The battle for the top of the hills became more and more intense. Flamininus and Philip received conflicting reports in their camps. Due to the fog, they could not see the full picture of the battle. Both commanders were faced with a difficult choice: to engage in battle on unfavorable terrain or to retreat, risking losing the initiative. In the end, the course of the battle forced them both to make a decision they wanted to avoid. They were forced to lead their main forces onto these awkward hills. The battle that no one had planned began. An experiment that did not go according to plan. That is how the beginning of this battle can be described. The thick morning fog mixed up all the cards. Neither Philip nor Flamininus had a clear idea of the enemy's disposition. The battle began as a chance encounter between reconnaissance units on top of a hill. The Macedonians were initially successful and began to push the Romans down the slope. Flamininus was forced to send almost all of his cavalry and light infantry to help. This changed the course of the battle at the front lines. Now the Romans began to defeat the Macedonians. Philip, upon receiving this news, made a fateful decision. He decided to bring half of his phalanx into battle to build on his success. This was risky, as the terrain was completely uneven. Nevertheless, the right wing of the Macedonian army, led by the king himself, began to climb the hills. The other half of the phalanx, the left wing, had not even finished forming and was lagging far behind. When the right wing of Philip's phalanx reached the top, it descended upon the Romans. On this relatively flat section of the hill, the phalanx was able to maintain its formation. Its attack was devastating. The wall of sarissas slowly but inexorably began to squeeze the left wing of the Roman army. The legionaries could not get within striking distance with their swords and suffered losses. It seemed that Philip's calculation had paid off, and victory was near. Flaminin saw that his left flank was on the verge of collapse. He threw all his reserves into this section, but it did not change the situation. At that moment, he made his most important decision. He realized that he could no longer save the left flank, but noticed what was happening at the other end of the battlefield. The left wing of the Macedonian army, which had fallen far behind, was just climbing the hills in complete disarray. Their formation had been broken, and they were an easy target. Flamininus took command of his right wing and led it in an attack on the disorganized left side of the Macedonian army. It was a decisive maneuver. The battle split into two independent engagements. The fatal weakness of the phalanx was revealed at the most crucial moment. But how exactly did the Romans manage to take advantage of this? In the next chapter, we will see how the flexibility of the legion turned the Macedonians' victory into their most terrible defeat. On the right flank of the battlefield, the Macedonian phalanx demonstrated its full power. Led personally by King Philip, it advanced slowly but surely. The legionaries of the Roman left wing found themselves in a desperate situation. The long sarissas gave them no opportunity to engage in close combat. The Romans tried to cut the spears with their swords or break through under them, but all was in vain. The monolithic formation of the Phalanx seemed impenetrable. The psychological effect of seeing this looming wall of spears was enormous. The Roman maniples slowly retreated under pressure, suffering losses. Discipline and experience allowed them to maintain their formation, but they could not stop the Macedonian onslaught. Philip, standing among the ranks of his army, encouraged his soldiers. He saw that his plan was working and that victory was near. In this section of the battlefield, his army was unstoppable. The success was due to the fact that the terrain here was more or less flat. The Phalanx was able to turn around and act as intended. It was the perfect tool for these specific conditions. The Roman centurions tried to organize resistance, but their efforts were in vain. Flamininus's left flank was on the verge of complete defeat. If the entire battle had taken place on such terrain, its outcome would have been a foregone conclusion. However, the battlefield was uneven. While the Macedonian right wing celebrated its triumph, their comrades on the left flank faced insurmountable difficulties. This contrast was the key to the outcome of the entire battle. Success on one flank blinded Philip. He was too preoccupied with pursuing the retreating Romans and did not see the big picture of the battle. He did not know what disaster was brewing on his left wing. This was the main problem with the Macedonian army. It was only strong when it acted as a single unit on ideal terrain. Any disruption of its formation or coordination was fatal. The Roman army, despite the difficult situation on the left flank, did not lose control. Its right wing was ready to act independently, and it got its chance. While the Roman left flank was retreating under the onslaught of Philip's victorious Phalanx, a completely different picture was unfolding on the right flank. Flamininus led his maniples to the left wing of the Macedonians. It was just climbing the hills, and its formation was completely disrupted. The legionaries easily overwhelmed the disorganized enemy troops. The Macedonians, unable to form a phalanx, could not offer serious resistance. This flank of the Macedonian army was quickly crushed. But Flamininus did not stop there. He saw that the right wing of his army was still in a difficult position. And at that moment, something happened that would forever go down in the history books of military tactics. One of the military tribunes, whose name, unfortunately, has not been preserved by history, made a brilliant decision. He acted without orders from Flamininus, showing typical Roman initiative. He saw that the rear of Philip's victorious phalanx was completely defenseless. This tribune took command of 20 maniples, about 2,000 men, and separated them from the main right wing. He made a quick maneuver and struck Philip's phalanx from behind. It was a deadly blow. The phalanx was designed to attack in only one direction, forward. Its soldiers had neither armor to protect their backs nor the ability to turn around quickly. They were completely defenseless against an attack from behind. The legionaries crashed into the rear ranks of the Macedonians. Chaos ensued. The phalangites, trapped between the retreating Roman left wing in front and the attacking maniples behind, could do nothing. Their long sarissas were useless in such a situation. The formation that was their main strength became their curse. It prevented them from turning around and facing the new enemy head-on. It was a triumph of flexibility over rigidity. The Roman manipulus, small and autonomous, was able to do what the phalanx was organically incapable of. It struck where no one expected it. The ingenious and timely maneuver of one mid-level officer completely changed the course of the battle. The Macedonians' victory turned into a crushing defeat in an instant. The attack from the rear had catastrophic consequences for the Macedonian phalanx. The formation, which a minute ago had seemed unbreakable, fell apart. The soldiers, attacked from two sides, lost control. Panic quickly spread through the ranks. The phalanxes in the rear, unable to fight, tried to escape. Their flight caused even greater chaos in the front ranks, which were still trying to hold back the Roman onslaught from the front. Philip V, who was at the forefront of the attack, realized the scale of the disaster too late. When he saw that his army had been defeated, he left the battlefield with a small group of comrades. His dream of reviving Alexander's empire collapsed in a single day. The Macedonian troops remaining on the battlefield tried to surrender. According to their custom, they raised their sarissas vertically, indicating that they were ceasing resistance. However, the Romans either did not understand or did not want to understand this signal. The legionaries, caught up in the heat of battle, continued their attack. They broke through the disordered ranks of the Phalanx, where their short swords, or gladiuses, had an overwhelming advantage. The battle turned into a pursuit. The losses of the Macedonian army were enormous. Thousands of soldiers were killed or taken prisoner. Roman losses were incomparably smaller. It was not just a defeat, it was a complete rout. The Battle of Cynoscephalae clearly demonstrated to the whole world that the era of Phalanx domination was over. The era of the legion had begun. The victory was not achieved through numerical or technical superiority. It was the result of a superior tactical system. The flexible, multi-level structure of the legion proved to be much more effective than the monolithic and unwieldy phalanx on any terrain other than perfectly flat ground. The initiative of one tribune, who dared to break formation to deliver the decisive blow, became a symbol of this new approach to warfare. The Roman army won because each of its elements could think and act independently for the common goal. The battle was over, but its consequences were just beginning to unfold, and they would change the political map of the entire Mediterranean. The defeat at Cynoscephalae forced Philip V to sue for peace on any terms. The Romans dictated a harsh treaty to him. Macedonia lost its entire fleet, was obliged to pay a huge indemnity, and most importantly, had to withdraw its garrisons from all Greek cities. At the next Isthmian Games, Greece's main sporting festival, Consul Titus Quinctius Flamininus made a historic announcement. He proclaimed the freedom and independence of all Greek states. The Greeks greeted this news with enthusiasm, proclaiming Flamininus their savior and liberator. In reality, it was a cunning political move. Freedom, in Roman terms, meant that Greece was moving from the Macedonian sphere of influence to the Roman one. Rome was becoming the chief arbiter in the affairs of the Hellenistic world. The military significance of the battle was even more profound. It was the final nail in the coffin of the Macedonian phalanx as a dominant military force. All the Hellenistic rulers saw that their armies, built according to Alexander's precepts, were powerless against the new predator from the west. The legion proved its complete tactical superiority. Its ability to fight on any terrain, the flexibility of its manipulative structure, and the high individual training of its legionaries made it the ideal instrument for waging war. This system would dominate the battlefields for several more centuries. The Cynoscephals became a lesson for all future commanders. The lesson was that no system, even the most perfect one, can remain effective forever. The ability to adapt to new challenges will always be more important than blindly following old traditions. The battle also demonstrated the power of the Roman military and political machine. It showed that Rome was not just another power, but a force striving for complete domination. The path to establishing the Roman Empire was now open. The history of the Phalanx did not end there. It was still used in some armies. But it was never again considered the queen of the battlefield. Its place was taken by the legion. Thus ended the era begun by Philip Tishkund and Alexander the Great. A new era began, in which the rules were dictated not by a wall of spears, but by the iron march of the Roman legions. That foggy day at the Dogs' Heads changed the art of war forever. We saw how, on the hills of Thessaly, it was not just two armies that clashed, but two worlds, two philosophies. On the one hand, there was the monolithic power of the Phalanx, the legacy of the great conquests of the past. On the other, there was the flexible and adaptive system of the Roman legion, the weapon of the future. The Battle of Cynoscephalae proved that in war, as in evolution, It is not the strongest who wins, but the most adaptable. The decisive factor was not the length of the spears or the strength of the shields, but the army's ability to reorganize, think, and exploit the enemy's mistakes. The initiative of one nameless tribune proved more important than the genius of the illustrious king. This battle is a constant reminder that any system, even the most perfect one, has its vulnerabilities, and that sometimes, to win, you need more than just following a plan. You need the courage to break it. What other great battles of the past would you like to see on our channel? Perhaps the clash between Hannibal and Scipio at Zama, or the fall of Constantinople? Suggest topics for future videos in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on new journeys into the history of military art.